Hello, and welcome to the Positive Presence podcast. My name is Blake Cleaver, and I am a mentor coach with Positive Presence. And today I'm joined by a very special guest and a very important person in my life, my grandma, Karen Peterson, or as I like to call her, Nana. Thank you for joining me today, Nana.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, as a coach with Positive Presence, I see a lot of grandparents come into our program looking for support for the grandchildren that they're raising, or that they're just heavily involved in their grandchildren's life, and they're seeking support for their grandchild. And we have a unique dynamic because you raised me for a big part of my life as my grandma. So you kind of stepped into a motherly role with me. And what I was hoping to talk with you about today is just that experience, how it was for the both of us, and just how it came to be, and the type of support that you would have liked to see me have, or that you sought out for me in that role, serving as like a parental figure in my life. And I think we're probably going to talk about some things today that we have never really talked about. So I'm excited to have that conversation with you. And I think it'll be just helpful for us and our relationship, but also helpful for a lot of grandparents out there who are in the same position that you were in. So that's what I'm hoping to chat with you about today. And I guess we'll just start with, when did it come to be that you were going to, and did you know at that time that you were really going to be like raising me for a chunk of my life?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I knew how long it would be for, but when your parents were divorced and your father got custody of you, then I, as a grandparent, did not want you. I mean, your dad could have lived, he couldn't live on his own. He would have had to have roommates. And I really didn't want you in a.
And back up, tell people why dad would have had to have roommates, because he was in the military.
Well,
Right.
yeah, he was in the military, and then he was also having to pay child support, and financially he wouldn't have been able to, have a house of his own at that time, with having to pay the child support and whatnot before he got, so anyway, he would have had roommates, and I really didn't want you living with
in a fraternity house,
fraternity house type
for
thing.
lack of better words. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then of course, obviously when he was got assigned to Iraq, then became apparent that I was the one that was going to be the caretaker.
Okay. So how old was I when, I guess, dad and I moved in with you full time? And then how old was I when you realized you were taking on this caretaker role?
Right. Well, I think you were 8 originally when you came here, and then you were 10 when he left for Iraq.
Okay. So I was 10 years old when you stepped into this caretaker role. And were you apprehensive about stepping into this? I mean, you'd obviously raised dad, so you have experience, in the motherly role, but dad, I think was a lot different and you were in a different stage in your life when you took me on. So tell me a little bit about how you were feeling stepping into that role.
Well, it was good and bad. First of all, it was fun for me, and it was because I wanted a girl, and I got to dress you.
Okay.
So that was a fun thing.
Even if I didn't always love all of the outfits.
Yes, I know that you didn't like.
There's a few that come to mind. What are they? The jorts or shorts, or there? It's a skirt. Yeah, a skirt. Oh, I still remember that.
For your first day of school.
Yes, the skirt. Yes.
So that was a joy, of course. The hard part was, of course, with discipline. I didn't get to be a grandma and be the fun grandma like your other grandma got to.
Yeah.
Because, we had to have some sort of rules and order here.
Yeah.
So I think that was a difficult thing.
Yeah.
As time went on and you got older, it became more difficult, of course, for you and for me.
Yeah.
I think. And at that time is when we looked for help from the outside.
So how old was I when you say it got more difficult?
Well, I
Would
was
you say?
probably between 11 and 12.
Okay. Yeah. And so I came in, this is my interpretation, obviously, of the dynamic and
Situation.
situation, but the way that you raised dad and the way that like the way that I had come into the house, I think that you had different standards maybe and rules for dad when you were raising him and just rules for your house. And I came in not wanting to adhere to any of the rules that you had. I think, so I mean, from my end, looking back at it now as a 27-year-old, which I can, and appreciate everything, leading up to this point. But as an 11, 12, 13-year-old, I was very much like, don't tell me what to do, because you were my grandma. And so I think there was a dynamic there that I was like, I don't have to listen to you, because you're not my mom type of thing, even though you had stepped into that role. And so I can see from my side how it would have been really difficult to try to enforce any type of rules with me pushing back on everything and still maintain this, fun and bubbly, like grandma granddaughter relationship. Would,
Yes.
would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I also, came in with, I think maybe just like a lot of built up anger, which was new for you. Like, I don't know that dad maybe necessarily went through the type
No.
of, you know,
Situation you had
situations.
been
Yeah.
through.
Right. And so that was new. And I think I took you filling in that role, taking on that role as like primary caretaker and somebody that I was with every day, um, filtered a lot of that anger, like I think I took a lot of that out on you from my looking back on it now,
Right.
And so that made like our relationship difficult at
Mhm.
times, I feel like. So okay, so 11, 12, 13, you're realizing this might have been a little more than I could chew. And I need some support. And so at that point in time, what type of support did you seek out?
Well, then I reached out to a previous babysitter of yours,
Mhm.
pointed me to a therapist who she thought would work well with both of us.
Mhm.
And that was extremely helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And what type of things I was so young when I started working with my therapist. So I remember, some of the things that we did together, but I think, she really was focused in on tools and support for you, to help me in that way. So what type of suggestions did she give
Well,
you?
she had things about like for when you were going to go to bed at night, how we should have play music and different things. And then I remember one of my favorite things was that I got to rub your feet.
Yeah, and I still
Do
remember
you
that.
remember that?
Mhm.
Yeah. She tried to make calming things
Was it
to
hard
do.
for me to go to sleep at night?
Sleep, yes, yeah. We were
Okay.
having issues with that.
And did she think the lack of sleep was like impacting
Other parts of
other
your
parts?
life, yeah,
Right.
and perhaps how you were reacting to
Yeah. Because my
um,
my emotional
anxiety, yeah.
processing was not. I had so much emotion built up that I didn't know how to process, and I think it just came out in anger and frustration.
Mhm.
Yeah. So sleep impacted that.
Yes.
So that's one of the things. And then we've talked about, I was going to different homes and different, I have lots of different relationships in my life, and everybody runs their house a little differently, has different expectations. And so your rules in your house look different than some of the other rules that I had in other places. And so what was the thing that my
Yeah,
therapist told you to do?
yeah, that was another issue, like you said, you had a lot of parent people making rules for you, your
Mhm.
mother, your other grandmother, and whatnot. And so, one thing that she told me, because at your house with your mother, apparently there was a lot of screaming going
Mhm.
on.
Yeah.
And so she suggested that when you came here at the front door, the minute you got in the door, that I turned you around several times
Uh-huh.
and said, okay, you're here at your dad's house, and we don't scream here.
We don't scream at this house. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cause it was, yeah. And so I came in thinking that is how you communicated.
Right.
And you were
You're like
probably very,
annoyed,
very, yeah,
to say the
upset
least.
about that. Yeah. Cause I remember, and I can vividly remember, getting in yelling matches with you, and not so much you yelling back at me, cause I don't think you really ever have yelled back at me. But I remember as a young child, like yelling at you, and looking back on that now is, of course, like it hurts me. And I know, I'm sure it was very hurtful for you. But I hadn't quite developed skills to be able to tell you, like, I'm hurting and I'm frustrated with my situation, without yelling about it.
Well,
So
yeah, that's what you were modeled. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
you saw, and
Mhm.
that's how you were raised, and so that's going to be natural.
Yeah. Okay, so getting into therapy, both for you and me, was very helpful.
Yes.
um what do you think, if ever, or when do you think was like the turning point in our relationship, and when did it happen? And
Well, that's a good question. It was still going on when you were in high school. I mean,
Right.
even though you were living with your dad then, I guess that at that point, and that's probably a different situation
Yeah.
than most people had, but and the therapist told us too that it was time for me to let go,
Mhm.
back out.
Mhm.
And I'm feeling I've invested this much
Yeah.
in this child for this long,
Yeah.
and it was hard for me to give up
To let
that.
go.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine what that would have been like to step into that role. Cause your previous, as a mom, you raised dad, and you never had to stop being his
Right.
mom, right? Like you always got to step into that role, even though things changed in his life and he got older, and your relationship looked different. But you went from literally being the primary caretaker, being my primary caretaker, to dad coming home from the military and whisking me away, not, in a mean or hurtful way, just like
No.
I'm home now, and now, I have a home and my daughter can come live with me. Which I think was stressful and joyful for me, but it just totally changed the dynamic of our relationship almost overnight.
Right. Because, as a teenager, you're going to be at that rebellious stage.
Yes.
And you were going to take it.
No, I wasn't going to let you or dad or anybody
Anyone else,
else
really.
tell me what to do.
Right.
So I think, and do you think, I mean, I personally feel like probably, the generational difference played a big role in what I thought was acceptable behavior. And of course, all teenagers think, some
Oh, yeah.
behavior is
They
acceptable
mostly,
that is not.
right. Mostly they think their parents don't know.
Yeah,
let
they
alone
think,
their grandparents.
right.
So I could totally not know anything.
Yeah,
in your
so I
eyes.
thought my interpretation was that, you're old and you don't know anything about anything, and I know how to raise myself and
Yes.
function. And so do you think from your side, or did you ever feel like the generational gap impacted your ability to understand me or relate to me, or
Well, probably, obviously, to
Yeah.
some point. Um, I think the thing that I guess I would say I found hurtful in a way was that but I can also see where you were coming from, but like you were embarrassed to think that you were living with your grandmother.
Yeah.
You were like saying, like, oh, I have to tell people I live with my grandma. I mean,
Yeah.
you were embarrassed about
Yeah.
that. And that was hurtful to me in a sense.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I can see from your point, you wanted a family,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
always wanted a family,
Yeah.
and that wasn't happening. And,
Yeah. Well, at least
So
my
you-
family dynamic looks different from most.
Yes.
And I think, there's a lot of kids that can relate to that. And I don't think that it was an embarrassment of you, or I think
no,
it was
not me
just
personally, but just
society
the
tells
idea.
you,
The
yeah,
idea.
yeah. Society tells you this is what a family structure looks like. And that's not what my family structure looked like, but you held your head high and you kept going, and you went to every Girl Scout event and every school event, and you know, hung out with the moms and, you know, you
The
did
ice
all of those
skating,
things. Yeah.
it was a fun time for me, like I said, and I
Yeah.
got to dress you even though you didn't like it.
Until I got to be a teenager and
Yeah, and
then
then
you were
those
like, what are we doing? Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was fun to see the proms and
Mhm.
those things.
Yeah, I think, you know, you had a unique experience as a grandma than most people get because you got to be on both sides. But I think, you know, it's obvious that it was very difficult for you and me, you know, as a kid and trying to, you know, there's so much pressure, I think, at school and socially when you're young, like to be anything that's outside of the norm is really hard. So to have to say like, well, I live with my grandma. Like people get picked on for stuff like that,
Yeah,
and it's
probably.
hard, you know. And so that's probably I feel like where a lot of the embarrassment or shame came from is you know being fearful of what people would think, you know. And then there's questions: why do you live with your grandma?
Yes, and then
Yeah, and then you have to get into like, well, what's you know what's the reason, and how did I you know end up
and I
living
know
with
I
you?
always felt sorry for you because yeah, I felt that you had to share those things with people, you know. And that was a hard thing for you. I mean,
Yeah,
to have to
to open up
all
about
that
the
was
tough
happening on your
things.
life. Yeah,
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
personal.
Yeah, absolutely. I obviously had a lot of support in my life, but do you? And I was, you know, I was in therapy. Now, seeing me as a mentor coach, do you think that having a mentor coach at that stage of my life would have been impactful for me?
Yes, I do. Then all those different things would have probably, you know, been easier for you.
Mhm. Yeah, especially, I mean, now
If you
as
had someone that was a little closer to your age to talk to you, because you probably still thought the therapist to some extent was
yeah,
on my side,
yeah,
type thing. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
I
I
think
do, you
that would
know,
be a fair statement.
yeah, I remember because we had our sessions and they were separate sessions, but you know, every time the therapist talked to you, I was like, well, you know, she's not going to see it from my side because Nana's going to get in there and, you know, say whatever it might be. And so I feel like to have someone who's not on my side, but to have someone who I feel like this person is here for me
Yes,
and can relate to me
right.
would have been extremely helpful and
Oh,
impactful in my life. And that's a big part of why I became a mentor coach. And I see it, you know, play out with students who have a similar lived experience as me, or, you know, maybe they are being raised by a grandparent for whatever reason it might be, you know, and that's just a tough dynamic as, you know, as we've talked about already. But I guess what do you think we'll do the hardest time. What do you think the hardest time was, and what do you think, you know, our best time has been?
That's time was spent. Um, well, maybe a hard time, and this is, I mean, I know it was very traumatic for you. Let's talk about when your dad was leaving to go
Yeah.
to Iraq. He had made arrangements to let you get a puppy,
Uh-huh.
and I said to him, "You are not leaving me with a child and
Hmm.
a puppy while I am at work."
Yeah. Yeah, because you were working at
Yes,
this
I was
time.
working
Yeah.
full time, and this wasn't going to be. And I know that was terribly disappointing to you and to him.
Yeah.
So that Christmas,
Uh-huh.
I was at the mall and I thought I saw this dog
Uh-huh.
that was like in a cage and like he was just this cute little puppy and he had batteries in him and so he looked like he was breathing.
So he's not a real puppy.
He's
Yeah,
not a
not
real
a real puppy.
puppy.
It was a toy.
He's a
It was
toy, but he
like,
looks like he's alive.
yeah,
And so you got all excited when you saw this and everything.
because it was in a box, I remember, with like air holes.
Yes.
And the toy dog looked like it was
Breathing.
breathing. And yeah, so I came down and you had it in front of the Christmas tree. I remember, how old was I, do you think, at this time?
Oh, that's probably 9,
9, 10. Yeah.
possibly.
So I go rush downstairs and I think, oh, this is gonna
I
be a
finally
puppy.
got a puppy.
Yeah. And I open up the box and I discover that it's a toy And I had what is and probably the biggest meltdown of my life.
Yeah.
Like total complete.
So bad. Oh yeah, it was a terrible, terrible,
It
terrible
was
thing.
bad. Yeah. So
was
dad
really bad.
calls from Iraq
Yes, and you
to tell me, Merry Christmas. And yeah, and I told him, and I was just heartbroken.
devastated. So now I'm really, have a big guilt complex and
Yeah.
feeling really, really, really bad for her because, yeah, now it's trauma on
What you thought
top of
was,
trauma.
yeah,
what
what
I
you
thought
thought
was
was
going to
gonna
make, cute little thing. Oh no,
it ended up being really bad.
it was really bad. But then we went on the search for the kitties.
Yeah. So then Nana told me, you can't have a puppy, but you can get a cat. And I wanted a kitten. And that was what that would have been, what,
It
January?
was for your birthday. Well,
Oh,
yeah,
for my birthday,
it
for
was going to
March.
be your birthdays when we decided
That's right.
March. But little did we know that kittens don't always
Yes.
come about at that time of the year.
Yeah. Yep. So we went on this search and we couldn't find a cat anywhere. No kittens anywhere. Nobody had them. And I remember being at the post office and I was crying again. I was upset because we couldn't find a kitten. And we just happened to be in the post office. And this
We're
lady,
talking about
and we're
this.
talking about it. Yep. And this lady who worked at the post office she said, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Are you looking for a kitten? And we said, yes. And she said, well, my cat just had kittens, right? It was like an accidental thing. And so I have kittens and they're not ready yet, but you can come look at them, next week or in the next couple of weeks. And we did. And I don't remember how I convinced you to get two.
Well, I think the thing about the two was that when we were looking around at some of the shelters and stuff, that one of the people said to us, it's kind of a good idea to get two so they can entertain each other if you're not going to be home and everything. But I wasn't quite sure about that. But yes, then you were like, I thought, well, I've messed up so bad with this dog thing that I better give in to this. And then besides that, they were so cute.
They were so cute. So we got two little kittens and they were just the cutest thing ever. Yeah. And did you feel like that was a lot to juggle the kittens and me?
Well, no, there was
not so much.
Not so much.
Yeah. And then when I moved out with Dad, you got stuck with the kittens.
Yes, I have the kittens. Yeah. I still have one of them.
Yes. Yeah. So that was a bad and a good time.
That was a bad and a good time.
Yeah.
I think the good times were I think all the things that, like you said, I put you in a lot of classes, a lot of summer things and everything. And sometimes at the time of that, you weren't so
I wasn't happy
excited about it. But seeing you in those plays that you did in that theater program, and you seem to enjoy it, even though, and the ice skating.
Yeah, and I figure skated. Yeah,
figure skated. And I guess you were still here with the first mission trips from church.
Yeah, I did go on some mission trips, which is good. Yeah. So you just tried to, I think, bring in anything that you could, like enrichment into my life. Right. Which I think was helpful for me, definitely my own personal development and opportunities that I didn't have.
Your swimming lessons and the things that normal kids would do. But, that's how I tried to handle it. I don't know if it was good or bad or.
Well, I think with any parent, and of course I'm not a parent at this time, but I think there's no handbook out there for the right way to do it, and not every family and child is the same. So there was never going to be the best way to handle that situation. But I think you did everything that was within your power. And I know, looking back at it now, I can say absolutely that I am so appreciative of every opportunity and every, situation that I got, and also the time that I've got to spend with you, much more than I think any grandchild probably gets to spend with their grandma. So I'm super appreciative of that and the relationship that we have now. I know that as I've gotten older, I can look back at those things that were so hard and things that I just thought you didn't understand, and you were just doing to be mean, or whatever, everywhere that you met me with like structure and discipline, I was so mad, like, you're not going to tell me what to do, type of situation. And I can look back at it now and see as an adult, like, this is why, and this is the
Mhm.
changes that it's made in my life, even if I didn't follow the structure that you would
At the
have liked
time.
me to, always. And that has led to repercussions in my life that I've then had to like adjust to, and learning. But I can look back and be thankful for all of those, things now at this point in my life. And I just really appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So I guess my next question for you is, do you have any, advice for a grandparent in a similar situation as you were raising me? Mm.
Well, I would say, don't look at it as a burden.
Mm.
Um, you know, like I said, I think it was a wonderful opportunity in a sense,
Mm.
even though it was harder for you.
Yeah.
But I'm personally was thankful that I had that opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, so,
And I would say an adult now, like I just said, looking back, I can look back at all of the tough times and just appreciate everything that we went through and where it's brought us. And I think that we're so much closer now, and we have a really good relationship now, even
Mhm.
though we had tough times back then. And it wasn't all bad times. I mean, we had
No,
a lot of really good times too. But I think it comes full circle, just as any child
well,
as they become an
even with
adult.
their parents,
Yeah,
that's the same
absolutely.
kind of a situation. Yeah.
Absolutely. You stepped in, and I think a really hard time for any parent that age,
Yeah.
10 to 13, 16, that's hard. That's a hard age for anyone. And so,
Yeah, and I think like what you're saying with the mentoring type thing
mhm,
that you're doing today would have been a wonderful thing for you at the
yeah,
time to
yeah,
get through this.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
I agree. I think so too. And that's
Even
why,
with your things that, not just you had it with me, but you
mhm,
also had, the normal things that kids do have at school and
yeah, every young
all
adult
that.
and
Yeah,
teenager goes
I
through.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that seems to be more more so than it was like when your dad was growing up.
Yeah, more prevalent for whatever
Right. I don't
reason.
know. But
Either
I
we're
think,
talking about it more, or, with social media and the pressure from society, especially for, young kids, and what you
yeah,
see, what's represented on social media is not, you know, reality, but a
right.
lot of kids think it
It
is,
is, yes.
so there's a lot that they feel they have to live up to. And I see that, as a coach. But yeah, that's why I coach now. And I think,
That's
everything
awesome.
everything that we've gone through has allowed me to reflect back on and be able to help kids in whatever,
Someone else having to go through that. You
Mhm.
can say, yeah, I had to be with my grandma
No,
too.
I don't say that. If anything, I regret, I think, some of my actions growing up.
Sure,
But
but
yeah, you live and you learn, and you get older, and you can, it's all, in retrospect.
well, now
But
you're giving back and helping others, so
yeah,
that's good.
yeah. Well, thank you, Nana, for sitting down with me and having this conversation. I love you so much, and I appreciate the role that you have filled in my life, and that you're willing to sit down and have this conversation with me.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad that you did it. I'm proud of the little girl that you've become, or the big girl that you've become, from
Thanks,
the little
ma'am.
girl.
Yes, thank you.